Hey everybody, welcome back to the Overwatch Project. Check out my website at OverwatchProject.com. That's OverwatchProject.com. You'll find a lot of info on my site. This is a reality check podcast. I'm going to go over a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm not going to tailor it for people that don't know what I'm talking about. Since I'm making a podcast, sort of broadcasting in the blind, I don't know if people listening are less informed than I am, equally informed, or more informed. I have my own nuanced interpretation of certain information, and it may differ from others. It may also be the same as others. It all depends on who it is that's doing the interpreting, I guess. The whole point of my podcast is to talk about reality and what we are really doing here, the true meaning of life. Where did we come from? What is going on with the human race? And, evil, good, all that stuff. All the deep, deep stuff. So let me start out with saying that in my earlier videos on YouTube, you can get to my YouTube channel from OverwatchProject.com. I would make sure that I put all this source material that I could find in the description section. Whatever I was talking about in my video, I usually had sometimes up to 30 links for people to check out. I found that either people already knew this information, very, very few looked up or went into the description section and checked out what I was talking about, or the ignorati, as I think Mark Passio coined that term, the ignorati didn't give a crap about information. I recently had a YouTube exchange, a little comment exchange, with someone who I thought was an intelligent, sane person, quickly devolved into revealing that other person's insanity. And we're talking about something scientific, but the scientific data countered his so-called professor view of the world, and therefore he became a lunatic rather quickly. It's so bad that I had to shut down the comment section of my last video. I also managed to irritate the flat earthers. So you can imagine the vile, nasty, lunatic, fringe, disgusting, violent even comments I was getting, so I had to turn it off. So screw all of these people that want to remain ignorant. Remain ignorant. You do not have to listen to me. You don't have to go to my website. You don't have to care about anything I say. What I say is my business. I'm putting it out there for anyone who wants the information. And so I should go into, I think I'm going to cover everything. So let's start with me personally. I was born in the United States of America. I grew up in the Northeast, and I was born into a family that had recently moved to the United States legally. And matter of fact, my first language wasn't even English. I actually picked that up as I went to kindergarten and first grade. I went through from kindergarten all the way through high school in Catholic education. That's right, I was raised Catholic. And just like everybody else, I'm born. I don't have any memory of what I was before. I don't know anything. My mind is a clean slate. And like most people on the planet, garbage in, garbage out, I was fed a bunch of information that even at an early age, I questioned because it just wasn't making sense with me. So, Catholic school did give me guilt to overcome and fear of burning in hell for all sorts of crazy reasons that they come up with. Meanwhile, they're running probably one of the biggest child abuse organizations on the planet, and but making me feel guilty about, like a girl. Oh my gosh, if I have a lustful thought, I might go to hell. So I had to overcome a lot of that stuff, but in the school I went to, we were actually taught by nuns and sometimes priests, and also non people that weren't in the church, like I guess you would call them civilian teachers, or teachers that were not directly employed as Catholic Church nuns and priests, but were just regular people. So in this whole educational scheme, ironically, the religion teacher was always like, I guess you would call a civilian. And as a civilian, they were kind of hands-off, usually more intelligent than the nuns and the priests, and they were, you were able to ask them questions. So whenever contradictory things would come up in religion class, I would always bug the teachers to the point where I drove some of them insane trying to answer my questions. Even as young as 8 years old, I was doing this kind of stuff. And in the course of my education, I had a bunch of garbage in. So I spent a lot of my time, a lot of my life with garbage out. On top of that, the entertainment industry, I know people always try to figure out what are they trying to propagandize this about? What is the mind control with the entertainment industry and the way that they insert politics and stuff in there? But I'll tell you, underneath all of that, in the entertainment industry, there is one core piece of propaganda that is perpetuated throughout movies and television and even books and all sorts, and just about every piece of fiction that you can find in America, and I'm sure mostly everywhere in the world, and that is the propaganda of statism, or the fictitious authority of the state, that it is somehow moral in its coercion for taxes and other things that it does. And that's why we have so many police shows and crime shows that basically fortify this notion that only a governmental agency can perform these jobs, when we do have things like private protective services and investigations all over America. But for some reason, TV shows, most of the time, even if they're doing a show about a private investigator, they are propping up the state right behind them as being a necessity or a necessary thing, usually at adversary of the private investigator. That is most of the time in fiction of that type where you find that kind of plot. Anyway, so you're fed with a whole bunch of stuff about statism. That even comes from sci-fi, like Star Trek with the Federation, etc. So I grew up with all of this garbage in, and I spent a lot of my time questioning it, and a lot of garbage out came out of me during that time. But there was something in the back of my mind. I was in a state of what you would call nascentness. I was questioning what I was told, but I really didn't have access to information to counter it. Not until about 1995, 96. And that is the true, actual, and I'll clarify this in a second, I'll define it a little bit better, the actual apocalypse of humanity happened in that time. And what do I mean by that? Now, most people out there, very few listening to me, I bet, know what apocalypse actually means. If you ask somebody what does apocalypse mean, they usually think it means the end of the world, or they think it means the second coming, or etc., something like that. But in reality, the word apocalypse simply means revelation. Things are revealed to someone or a bunch of people. And revelation comes with information. It has nothing to do with the end of the world. Apocalypse is a word that simply means revelation. And if someone has an apocalypse, it means that they've had a revelation. In 1995 and 96, the true explosion of information happened via the internet becoming mainstream. And up until recently, the recent few years, the information age was there. Free reign, uncensored. Basically, it was the beginning of me figuring things out. And it took me until about 2012, I think. 2012, 2013, before it really started to unravel the garbage in, garbage out mindset that I had. I started to confront my cognitive biases, which my brain, I realized, was working against me, against my consciousness, in biasing information in a way so I wouldn't see the big picture, the totality of information. Most people don't, okay? I've said it time and time again. If you really want to understand reality, if you really want to know and connect the dots, so to speak, and see the big picture, you need to have a total picture, meaning you need to accumulate a whole bunch of information, and then you need to come up with conclusions that fit all of that information in its totality, so that you're not being a dick or an asshole about it and excluding information because that doesn't make me feel comfortable, or I don't want it to be like that. My definition, my perception of reality is too disturbed if I look at it that way, so I'm just going to forget about this piece here or forget about this piece there. People do that all the time. I used to do it. And you do it because you're not aware of it. So the first person you need to debate or confront when you're doing this kind of research, when you are actually interested in seeing the big picture of reality, is you need to confront yourself. I confronted myself, and after a few years of debating and analyzing what I was doing to my own thinking, I came out of it and had a complete unraveling and complete reordering of the way I saw the world. And this led to a more like Gnostic type worldview. The Gnostics Gnostic means knowledge. So my philosophy is knowledge-based, not faith-based per se. It's spiritual, it's not religious. And let me just try to then start going back and let's take a look at humanity. And let's do it through a common sense. So not much source material is needed here. This is just common sense stuff. So the human race is quite different than life here on the planet. And really there should be a good explanation for that. But we don't have any good explanation. None that comes from the official mainstream sources or schools. Most of that is BS when you stop to think about it. Evolution is bullshit. The religious creation thing is bullshit. But there is some possibility that certain ancient documents do give us clues. And this is where I need to be very careful, because there's a fine line between deducing that certain things may have happened in a certain way by some external force and coming up with imaginary fill-in-the-blank shit like Zecharia Sitchin does, where he grab-asses this Nibiru planet with the atmosphere out of thin air. The real reason why the so-called Anunnaki wanted gold, etc., we don't really know any of that stuff. But let's go back and let's start the beginning of the beginning. So human race appears here on Earth, and really modern-day archaeologists and stuff like that, when you really look at the totality of information, there's really a kind of a crappy official story that really doesn't fit the evidence. Look at the megaliths and these mega structures that are similar all over the planet. They are phenomenal in size and weight, and it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for human beings today without an unbelievable expense to pull some of this off today with our modern machinery and technology. And yet we are supposed to believe that people living in primitive hunter-gatherer and or agricultural societies with no modern medicine, no modern scientific technology, and a high mortality rate. Lots of people died even just giving birth in these ancient times. We're supposed to believe that these people, human beings from our past, decided that, and keep in mind now, when I'm hungry, if I'm hungry, well, I can just go to the local, whatever, grocery store, restaurant, where I live, there are so many. Sometimes I don't know where to eat because there are too many choices. I could just drive there in my car in a few minutes, give over some fiat currency to the employee, and they'll give me whatever I desire to eat. I can pick from an endless menu of all kinds of foods. I don't have to hunt for my food. I don't have to wait for it to grow. I don't have to keep an eye on my crops and hopefully everything turns out okay and there's not too much rain or too little rain. I don't have any of that concern in the United States at the moment. And so we may forget that these people in ancient times, their primary concern was probably how to stay alive. And that they want you to believe, that all over the world, people devoted massive amount of resources, massive amount of work that consumed a massive amount of calories, which required an unbelievable amount of food and water to fuel, to polish and carve and transport over hundreds of miles ridiculously large megaton stones to make enormous megalithic structures. And that they were all, this is a good idea. This is a good investment in our time and energy because, we don't have enough to do with just trying to feed people and find water that's clean enough to drink and keep enough of us alive. While all that's going on, they're also involved in conflicts with other tribes, other civilizations around them. All this is happening, and these people have the time, energy, manpower, with lower population on the planet, to do this. You don't need to know all the details of archaeology to know there's a big problem with this notion that we did it. There's a big problem even trying to figure out why we would do it. So, if you really look at the totality of information, I'm not going to go into the source material here. If you want to know, you will do your own research. A good place to start is my website, OverwatchProject.com, but you can also go to other resources, which I link to many on my site. Let's just go with my guesswork. The Earth was probably not exactly a paradise, but it may have had at one point a zero tilt axis. The climate here may have been nearly perfect. Life on the planet was completely balanced. There is natural law that governs everything in the universe, and we on Earth were probably completely in sync with it. There may have been a humanoid type life here prior to humans that were completely connected to life here on Earth, and everything was okay. At some point, and I usually, just a side note here, I usually deal with the spiritual side, non-physical side of this on my podcasts and my videos. But I realized I was neglecting the actual physicality of our experience of existence here. And it needs to be addressed. I mean, if you look at cases like Travis Walton, there is a physical side to aliens, physicalization of these things that affect us and that interact with us as human beings on Earth. So back to the story now, that this is just a general hypothesis. Something happened, a cataclysm, something. May have been on purpose. The Earth axis is tilted. Now we have 4 seasons, hurricanes, tornadoes, and other cataclysms around the planet. A planet that was between Mars and Jupiter is now reduced to an asteroid belt. We have a moon, which science has a really hard time explaining how it got there. And it may be part of our reincarnation trap here on Earth. And human beings are a product of some thing. You can call them aliens, you can call them deities, you can call them whatever you like, an external entity or entities interfered with life on this planet and DNA engineered humans out of some of DNA code from elsewhere, maybe their own, and DNA from Earth. And we are not, human beings are not a natural physical product of the Earth or of the creator of this universe. We are an interfered with byproduct. And we may have been made to be slaves originally, even possibly to extract gold. That is a possibility, because the other thing that you have to look at through common sense, these same people that really could not devote the resources that we're told they devoted to moving and creating megalithic structures for some whatever reason they had. Also, ancient people, what on earth would they want with gold? How would they even begin to know where to find it? And why would they go through the trouble of extracting it and purifying it? Because until modern technology is invented, until you have things like circuit boards, computer processors, and other things, gold has no intrinsic value. You could easily find other shiny things on Earth that don't require much effort and are very pretty. There's plenty of things like quartz around, all kinds of crystals and other fine things that you can discover that don't really require human beings to be put to work in horrific conditions in primitive times, digging out material from the earth. And I don't know if you've ever seen what gold looks like before it's turned to gold, but when they pull it out of the ground, it's not exactly the pretty thing you see in the jewelry store. And all this is done for what reason exactly? Why would we want it? And why would it be so valuable to us? Or will we just... Is Earth, in my opinion, possibly, these beings that created us, that, well, I would say created the physical human avatar, that now is reproducing here on Earth and is occupied by non-physical spirits that incarnate here, because I guess the non-physical and the physical somehow have some kind of symbiotic relationship where we spirits incarnate into physical matter for some reason that I haven't quite figured out yet. But here on Earth, it's not a good thing, because we're a planet that is run by an elite, literal word meaning Satanistic type elite. Well, they think of themselves as elite, but plainly just evil group of people that want to enslave and continue the enslavement of humanity. Now acting as a giant cargo cult type planet where we mimic what our creators who are no longer here have done to us. So we worship a fictional authority called the state. We enslave ourselves and we enslave others. We're all enslaved under the authority of government, with its coercion that begins with taxation. And then we mimic this principle of like creating a fake pseudo-religious belief in this fictional authority called the state. And so we act like a giant cargo cult, a giant cosmically abandoned race of beings that whatever happened here happened. And I hope you're all following along with this. A lot to take in, especially if you've never heard this material before. But I suggest if you don't know what natural law exactly is, look at Mark Passio's presentation. If you don't understand some of this other stuff, you might want to read some of David Icke's materials or look at other sources online. And not everybody that I mention means I agree with everything they say or their interpretation of the information, but that's the key. See, the key to understanding reality and doing your own reality check is knowing that information has nothing to do with the sources that give it to you. Information is either true or not, and it can be mixed with false information. So you can get good information from bad people. You can get bad information from good people because they interpret information and they also possibly add their own imagination into it. I think that's one of the things like Zecharia Sitchin did in his works, where he took a core element of honest interpretation of the ancient Sumerians and added his own creative, imaginatory story out of it, whether that was done on purpose or by accident or because of ego, I don't know. But information is just information. In fact, the whole reality here, something that the dialectic between those who want to fight for a physical globe Earth and the flat Earth don't seem to get about me, is that I'm trying to say its information is primary. If I'm going to make a universe, I'm going to make it with information. That's how it exists in a virtual reality that we can make on a computer or a gaming console. And that universe can be enormous because it's just an equation. So you can have infinity inside of a universe that you create. And because the information says it's infinite. So, yeah, there's... I don't want to get into it again with the crowd that becomes violent whenever there are ideas. But just on the case, there's a few people out there that have an open mind and aren't just completely ignorant buffoons. If you're stuck on one of these paradigms, like the flat earth paradigm, I have made another video with links included so you can go to the companies. There are private charter companies. And please don't leave any ignorant remarks or I'll shut off the comment section again. But there are private charter companies. And since I don't have a problem with this information, but the flat earthers do, I recommended before in this earlier video, create a crowdfunding campaign. There are sea, ship, and aircraft companies that will fly. I've checked them out. They exist. There are many of them. They will fly you. They will pick you up at your port of call and take you to Antarctica, and you can sail or anywhere you want to go down there. It is amazing, but they have private companies you can hire to do that. You can have an entire cruise to Antarctica if you want to, and then sail around the continent and measure in physical time using simple math how long it takes. No rockets required. But the circle of your flat Earth map in Antarctica would be quite different than the round Earth one. So just do the experiment yourself if you really want to know. If the ancient Greek experiment, where the ancient Greeks knew more than we do with a few sticks and some shadows, and separating the sticks apart to measure the curve of the so-called physical Earth isn't enough for you, then by all means go to Antarctica. And I don't give a crap who I piss off anymore. The ignorant are going to remain ignorant. That's the thing about going back to the apocalypse or the revelation of the information age. In 1995, we had an explosion of information, so no one has the excuse that the information is not available. It will no longer be available soon because they are cracking down on the information of the internet age, and they are censoring it, and they are brainwashing people into these social justice warriors, so-called. There's nothing social, nothing just. They're not warriors. They're mindless zombie idiots that they've created through their educational system and their companies. Don't you hate it? Don't you hate it when you go on YouTube and you search for something, if it has like alien abduction in the title, YouTube feels obligated to put that fucking Wikipedia link underneath there to explain to you just how wrong you are, or anything to do with a conspiracy theory, and underneath there, I will decide for myself what is good information is bad. I don't need YouTube telling me anything. I see they used to be just a provider, an exchange service. But now they are becoming their own information police. And so ends the apocalypse. It'll slowly fade away. Our ability to look up anything, read anything, will, unless these idiot tards are stopped, will disappear. But in the meantime, we've had, 1995, 2005, 2015, before the SJWs rose up after that, and YouTube started, and Google and Facebook all started meddling with information. 20 years where no one had an excuse of ignorance, of nascentness, where they didn't have access to the information. For 20 years, from your laptop, from your desktop, from your phone even, there was simply access to everything. Every book, so many people that you've never got a chance to listen to before. From 2005 and on YouTube, so many videos of fascinating topics and people exchanging ideas. And if you just go through, like, say, Passio's work, which is good, a lot of good stuff in there, lots and lots of good stuff. I have certain nuanced interpretations of some of his conclusions of certain things that I differ from. For example, Mark Passio has said that even though it's virtually impossible, he's willing to reincarnate here as often as necessary for as often as many lifetimes as it takes to free humanity. And I respect that, but I tell you, I am so disgusted with the ignorant people of this planet that I am determined not to reincarnate here ever again, because I don't want to help people that don't want to help themselves. Most people on this planet are ignorant assholes, and they deserve the enslavement that they are going to get here under the globalist agenda, which will eventually, do whatever to everybody on this planet. So, more power to him, but really my perception of this place is even more negative than Passio's, believe it or not, if you ever listen to some of his talks. And likewise, David Icke, he's got some good stuff, but he also thinks that humanity can save itself. I don't know that, because in reality, out of 7.5 billion people, maybe only 100,000 on the whole planet even come close to understanding what the hell is really going on here. Earth is a broken world that was interfered with in the past. Human beings are broken, defective biological avatars that ensnare and create some kind of addictive environment for spirits to incarnate here. It's not for a good purpose. It's more like a broken machine. An addictive, broken machine that is just constantly pumping out more humans, and there's endless amounts of spirits out there probably waiting to incarnate here. I know this sounds crazy if you don't know about reincarnation, if you don't know about all the data from near-death experiences, if you don't understand all the information available out there, like from the University of Virginia Perceptual Studies Division and other universities. If you haven't gone online and read the Sumerian text yourself from Oxford University or that other college I have linked on my links section, where you can actually look at the Sumerian text. If you haven't looked at all this information, if you haven't read whatever religious book you happen to be subscribing to because you were born into a certain religion, if you haven't actually read the entire book, like I have of my religion, to deconstruct everything that you've been told, if you haven't done all this work, then you have a lot of work to do, or you are going to choose to ignore it, because that's what it really means. People are ignorant because they are ignoring information. They don't want to know, and they're not going to know. And my personal hypothesis, based on a whole bunch of data, is that people that die in ignorance will most likely be back here again. And it may be as simple as knowing what's going on here to be able to escape. And, just as a side tip to anybody out there who doesn't want to be reincarnated here again, a good idea might be to give yourself your own life review. I've frequently meditated on my own life review and tried to imagine all the bad things I've done, on how it made other people feel, if I've ever done anything to insult anyone or to put anyone down or to belittle anyone. I mean, I don't have anything major. I was never out there committing like crimes or anything, but there are things I've done looking back at them. Like I say, I wish if I had known then, and that's the key. If I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have done that. I would have not done that. So when you get your life review, you can be ready for that and say, yeah, well, if I wasn't born ignorant, nascent, and then I wasn't fed a whole bunch of garbage information from my parents who got it from their parents, and then sent me to a school who filled my head full of more lies and bullshit, and then if I didn't get propagandized by the state, I wouldn't have done any of this stuff. So you know what? If you didn't want me to do it, you should have let me be born knowing what I knew at the end, which under quantum mechanics makes sense, really. You can know what's at the end of something because time is only linear through our perception. A lot of this stuff is going to go over so many people's heads. They're not going to get what I'm saying. I am kind of rambling. But hey, 37 minutes into this now, a little bit over. I think I've rambled enough on my reality check. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good day, good night, or whenever you happen to be listening. Don't forget OverwatchProject.com. And as long as you're not dicks, you won't be blocked in the comment section. See ya, and bye-bye.